Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Crikey, we're going to talk about an Aussie, mate.
Tom, I would like for me to just talk with my normal American accent and you talk with your Australian accent for the entirety of the show. Can you do that?
That's not a knife. That's a knife.
You don't have to do it in dingo lingo. You just have to do it with the accent. Like say your American football things, but do them with the accent. You don't just repeat stuff that Crocodile Dundee says. Do you understand?
Maybe the dingo ate your baby.
Again, Tom, not sayings, Australian sayings with an Australian accent, but actual conversation between me and you while you use your tremendous Australian accent.
The chocolate thunder from down under.
Sorry. I don't know. Okay. Thank you all for listening to the show.
I think I'm out of Australian things, so we might as well go on with the actual content.
Well, there's still like the Energizer. It'll surprise you. There's that. Any lines from Mad Max?
Yeah, I didn't hit on any Steve Irwin. Oh, she's a beauty. That wasn't very good. Got to work on my Steve Irwin. Hasn't been relevant for a long time, as it turns out, for extremely tragic reasons.
Very true. A tremendous start to the show today. I love it. But we are going to start with the commitment of Australian punter Jesse Mirco to the Ohio State Buckeyes. Tom, how old is this kid? This man?
Is he?
Do we know?
23? He's older. Okay. It was I think like 23 or 24, something like that. I think he was a little older.
Yeah, you don't want a young Australian. You want a seasoned Australian, especially as a punter. And we know Ohio State has had success with that with Cam Johnston, who is arguably the best punter in school history, even though I know there are others who could definitely have that argument. But he was a 4-year starter, was really, really good, almost as good as J.K. Scott, one might say, who is arguably the greatest college football player of all time. But Cam Johnston was great for his time, and then he set the tone for Drew Chrisman, taught Drew Chrisman, who is an American punter, how to kind of be an Australian. And Tom, I view like Australian punters, they've really, I think they have changed the game of college football and will continue to, I suppose, eventually change the NFL. But you've got guys, these guys are wizards with kicking the football because of the Australian rules football and all the different stuff they do there that requires awkward, precise kicking. But before the Australians came in, it was like regular punting was like a regular fastball in Major League Baseball. And then you've got these Australian punters who come in and they're doing all these different things. It's like the breaking ball entering Major League Baseball or baseball in general. And it's like some kind of wizardry. And so now you've got Jesse Mirco to come in and continue doing that. I was on Mark Rogers' YouTube show last week, and I said, as long as you can, like Ohio State went from Cam Johnston, an Australian, to Drew Chrisman, who was Australian adjacent because he learned from him. And now you go back to an Australian. As long as that chain is never broken by having two Americans in a row, you can continue this excellence of Australian puntering, and that's what they've got with Jesse Mirco.
Yeah, it's like I feel like the Australians kind of brought that rugby style kick into college football, which has really changed the punt game quite a bit. Made it much easier for people to just sort of kick away from returners and get a nice roll. But you also see guys who can just, they can just like kill the football just on a dime almost. And it has turned into a pretty effective weapon in the college game, to the point that you see guys who are not Australian punters or don't do the like rugby style kicks, and you almost wonder why does anyone still do it that way? It's like the guys who do the straight on place kicking after soccer style kicking kind of took over. Like it seems like that has kind of changed the way that punting is done in college football, and I would say changed it for the better. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the charming accents or what, but they all seem like they're kind of characters, and they're all they're all pretty darn effective at what they do.
You mentioned characters. I think that comes from like my view of growing up in Australia is based on having Mad Max and the Road Warrior on Laserdisc. And so that's what I picture growing up in Australia is like. So it would make sense then that the people that continent that is produced by that way of life and grow up like that, stealing gas trucks or walking around in leather and crazy face masks, you're going to get some personality from that upbringing. And we've seen that Cam Johnston's a funny guy. But although, you know what? Michael O'Shaughnessy, he's weird and he's American. Drew Chrisman's a bit odd. He's American. I think maybe rather than Australians are quirky, I think just punters in general are odd.
There's probably something to that. I mean, they're always kind of off practicing by themselves and not with the rest of the team during practice, and so that's going to lead you to be a little, maybe a little bit different than a lot of the guys on the team. But there's just something a little different about Australian punters. Are you familiar with the Miami Hurricanes punter, Lewis Headley? Have you ever seen him?
Mm-mm.
Okay, well, I will describe him as you take a second to Google him right now. It's Louis, and the last name is Hedley. He was a freshman last year. He is covered with tattoos, like full sleeve tattoos on both arms, his neck up to his jawline. He looks like he's in about his mid-30s. Like he looks like he's probably a bouncer at a bar in some like not great part of Melbourne, maybe. And he's a punter, and we've come a long way from Reggie Roby wearing a Swatch watch on the field to have a guy who looks like that punting. I don't know. I don't know if it's the illusion of something being so different just because they're from halfway around the world, or if it really is. But I am all for as soon as Jesse Mirco announced that he was committing, I think you and I both sent a bunch of like 5 exclamation point like Australian punter back kind of texts back and forth to each other, which was exciting. That's what it's really all about.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at this SB Nation title on this Lewis Headley story. It says Miami's new punter is your dad's scariest coworker, and I see what they mean. So that is the newest Buckeye commit. And, Ohio State still with the number 1 class in the nation. I know you got a lot of people out there concerned that this is going to drag the class ranking down, but relax. You've got kickers and punters in every class, so it kind of evens out. Although, Tom, I would say punters generally no stars, 2 stars max. If you're an Australian punter, I think you could top out at 3 stars.
Yeah, but I mean, topping out at 3 stars, that person is also going to be tremendously underrated. Like Blake Hallbeal was the number 1 kicker in the country, and I think he was a 3-star. Like that's just kind of how it is. And Blake Hallbeal has, I would say, given Ohio State more than 3-star performance on the field. So it doesn't really matter. But unless you're worried about like average ranking of recruit or something. But yeah, I think they'll probably be just fine with him. And with as far ahead as they are of the rest of the class right now, rest of the nation, I don't think there's that much of a concern about a punter dragging things down too much on the average basis.
Well, and the Ohio State 2021 class also got a bit of a bump this week with the unveiling of the new Rivals rankings, which had Tunmise Adelier jump up from the number 44 player to the number 15 player, and has now gotten his 5th star from Rivals. Donovan Jackson, the guard, jumped up 34 spots from 50 to 16, and now has his fifth star from Rivals. He is the number 10 player in 24/7's rankings. So I think both of these guys might be composite 5 stars once 24/7 fully updates their rankings. But overall, Ohio State has, I think, 10 players in the new Rivals 100, which sounds crazy to say, but is about average for them, you know?
What's interesting is they have 10 players in the top 100, but they have 12 players in the top 103 because linebacker Reed Carrico is 101 and wide receiver Jaden Ballard is 103. So if you're willing to push it to the top 103, they have 12, which seems that seems above average, I would say. It's
not too shabby. Some of the other guys, and people are wondering, well, why are players moving up and down? And I think we've talked about this before, where maybe you do some adjustments based on the fact that if your previous rankings were a while ago, and not that there's been more camps, but more offers have come out, and if you've got a guy who is ranked like 45 and now he's 145 and he's got all kinds of rankings, then maybe you need to revisit that. But also, a lot of these recruiting reporters are talking to recruiting staffs, recruiting directors about players, and then you bring all of this information together, and then you can start to move guys. Plus, if you don't move players up and down, then there's no reason to click on your site, So you kind of need to do this, but I also don't think it's all just for the sake of clicks. I think there's always some adjusting that can be done, and I think you're seeing that here. So yeah, the rest of the 250 I think is coming out eventually, but just looking, Ohio State could have a pretty good class this year. Maybe, depending on those Washington guys, Tom, that we're always talking about, and they get those guys, I don't know, 5-6 5-star composites in the 2021 class, although, I think Travion Henderson might have to raise up a little bit in the Rivals rankings, but there's some definite possibilities. If you're a stargazer, Buckeye fans are going to have a lot of gazing to do.
Yeah, I mean, and they could potentially end up with 8 guys who are a 5-star according to at least one of the services. If everything kind of pans out and they get JT Tuimoloau and Emeka Egbuka and and all the guys who are 5 stars somewhere stay 5 stars, they could end up with 7 or 8 5 stars, which is pretty impressive. There was probably a little less movement than it might look like on some of these guys in the Rivals rankings right now, because I saw a lot of, well, how could they change rankings? I haven't seen anything new because I haven't been camps, and it was generally if you went through the list, there were certain guys that went up 30 spots or 40 spots, and that was just, I think, based on some earlier camps that had happened before everything shut down, or just earlier performances. And then, there were a whole lot of guys who moved down 2 spots or 3 spots, and they moved down 2 spots because there were 2 guys who went up 30 spots ahead of them. So Kyle McCord moved down 2 spots, the quarterback who's committed to Ohio State's 21 class. He moved down from 24 to 26. Everyone around him, everyone within 5 picks or 5 spots, almost 10 spots on both sides of him, also moved down 2 spots because Adelier and Jackson both jumped all of them. So when Jackson goes 34 spots up and Adelier goes up 29 spots, everyone above them is going to slide down a couple just for that reason. So I think that's probably reflective of the fact that there hasn't been a ton of additional evaluation done. But, there's certain guys who, Micah Morris, who's a Georgia commit and offensive lineman, he jumped up 45 spots from 86 to 41. So as a result of that, and a result of Adelier and Jackson jumping up, those 3 guys slid Marvin Harrison Jr., who's a wide receiver commit to Ohio State. They slid him down 3 spots. It's most of the guys are really kind of unchanged, and just there were a few guys who made kind of major leaps based on, probably scouting at certain camps or whatever. But most of the guys, I just wrote this up, wrote the article on this up, and I didn't bother explaining, this guy's down 2 spots, this guy's down 3 spots, because I mean, really functionally, they're basically unchanged.
Yeah.
There are some interesting differences though between like 247 and Rivals. Rivals has Travion Henderson, who's the running back who's committed from Hopewell, Virginia to Ohio State. Rivals has him 67th in the country. 247 has him 12th. So, that's actually a fairly big difference. And that may be a function of Travion Henderson is camped with 247 and not Rivals or something like that. But, so that can kind of tilt the ratings one direction or the other. But, there are some interesting kind of differences. J.C. Latham, who's a top prospect for Ohio State, he was like 3rd overall in the 247 rankings, and he's, I think, around 30, something like that, for maybe even lower for Rivals. So there's still some differences, but whether you're getting the 3rd overall player in the country or the 50th overall player in the country, he's probably still pretty good at football. Yeah,
just use the ranking you like best. Whichever one has your player ranked higher, use that one. And really, the most important thing to take out of these Rivals rankings is that Kyle McCord is still ahead of J.J. McCarthy by 7 or so spots. So that's really, they have McCord, the number 4 pro-style quarterback, McCarthy, the number 5. So there's clearly a separation there between those two. One is clearly better than the other. There is no doubt. So that is good for the Buckeyes. There's you just scroll through these, and that guy could be a Buckeye, that guy could be a Buckeye, but we'll see how things go, and really it'll be interesting to see then what additional movement each site. I guess we could even throw ESPN in there if you want, but if there's nothing further. I think pretty much everything is known about the players at this point from what has been done. I don't know what else you can gain because all of the offers are pretty much already out there. Although later on when teams start needing spots and their first targets are gone, so now they're down to their 4th and 5th options, and like they're throwing an offer out to DeJuan Jones. Does DeJuan Jones rise up a little bit later on in the rankings, a guy like that? So maybe there'll be some of that. You mentioned Henderson, like maybe not camping at Rivals, or maybe a guy did camp at Rivals and didn't look good, so he dropped, but 24/7 didn't see him that way, so he stays where he is. And the camp thing is always interesting. And then the school camps, those are a month away at Ohio State. So in a normal year they'd be a month away. And so now you don't have any of those school camps either, so the writers and analysts can't see them there. There's really nowhere for anybody to move now, but we'll see what to do. Like I said, you still have to generate. How you get Tom. How you got to keep your body moving so that it doesn't atrophy. Your car moving so that it doesn't atrophy. I think same thing with the rankings. There, you got to shake it up some, even if it's moving a couple guys up, you said 20 or 30 spots, and moving everybody else down a spot or two. Just get that blood flowing, create some interest, and that's what was done there. So that's the Rivals rankings. I'll be interested to see the algorithm and all of the math, how that changes the composite rankings, because that's really the one that I think everybody that's the one we use, you and I, when we're talking about these guys, because it's a composite, and therefore it's at least a little bit better.
Yeah, it's just if one group has seen someone and the other person hasn't, it's a good way to kind of balance things out, because there is a little bit of inequality of information depending on the sources. Some places have seen a lot of kids, other places are ESPN. I mean, there's a wide variety of people who've seen more kids in certain parts of the country. So yeah, taking the composite average, I think, is probably the best way to do it. So yeah, I'm looking forward to those being updated. But I mean, Rivals 247 right now still has not added Jesse Mirco to the Ohio State list of commits, even though he's a scholarship player. So that's I don't know if they just don't know how to rank him, so they're leaving him off right now. But yeah, that's he is a scholarship player, so he will be on that list at some point. So I think everyone's just sort of getting caught up and figuring stuff out right now.
He has no page.
Yeah.
He has no profile page. It's like when Michigan gets a commit from Massachusetts. They've got to create that guy's page. That's mean and offensive.
Australia, Massachusetts, and other foreign countries.
Well, Massachusetts was started as a prison colony for the English.
Is that true?
No,
feels like something I should. I was going to say it feels like something I should know. I don't think that's true.
Well, if you go to Boston right now and you walk down any street, it sure feels like it.
Yeah, it would feel like it. That's true.
So we haven't had really a chance to talk since Kevin Warren, the Big Ten commish, mentioned a week or so ago, was talking, had a teleconference, I think, and also was on the Big Ten Network saying that he was asked if other conferences aren't able to go, would the Big Ten also not play? And he didn't say no. And I don't think we've had a chance to really talk about that yet. And the fact that he didn't say no means that there is an opportunity to. Tom, have we talked about this on here?
No. Nope.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
So when you've got Jim Delaney, who was very good at saying no and would say it very quickly, you've got Kevin Warren, who's like, well, I think one of the key phrases was the Big Ten could have like an independent mindset when it comes to playing. And just the simple fact that he didn't say, no, we wouldn't play if other conferences aren't playing, we're going to be in solidarity. There is no solidarity right now among the conferences. And the SEC is all gung-ho. The Big Ten is now saying that they don't really care what's going to happen to the Mountain West. It doesn't really matter what the MAC is doing. Everybody is on their own at this point. I do wonder, does there need to be solidarity in the Big Ten? But we've seen James Franklin came out saying, well, I don't think it would be fair to punish 90% of the Big Ten if two teams or one team can't play. And I agree with that, I think, but I wonder if the Big Ten commissioner agrees with that. And he hasn't been asked that yet, I don't think. But that's a different that's a different thing than playing instead of the Mountain, playing while the Mountain West can't. But it seems that at this point right now, Tom, that they're going to be willing to safely move forward regardless of whether 100% of the nation or maybe even 100% of the conference can. And I don't know if that's to compete with the SEC. I don't know if that's to bring in as much money as possible in a year where that's going to, every bit is going to matter this year. But it is interesting that he is keeping his options open.
Yeah, I mean, and keeping his options open is probably the best way to characterize it, because he's not saying we're playing no matter what. He's just saying we're not going to absolutely say no if other people can't do it. And keeping your options open right now is probably a pretty good idea. You're still, we're still in like mid-May. So you have half of May, all of June, all of July, all of August to sort of get things sorted out before the season even really starts. We are 200 days away from the Michigan game as of Tuesday of this week. So, you're still a long way away. So there's no reason to rush into anything and make a real definitive yes or no statement. So so keeping your options open is like I said, a good way to describe what he's doing there. And it sounds like California schools, the California University of California system this week has already been talking about the fact that they don't think they're going to have students on campus in the fall. If you don't have students on campus in the fall, can you play football in the fall? That has seemed like that's been something of a red line for people in various conversations for various conferences that may not be something that some places are willing to do. So if that's true, then maybe the Pac-12 isn't playing. But if they feel like it's okay to do it in the Midwest or in the South, like you don't have to let the Pac-12, control what you're doing. You can make the best decision for you, and if that's not the same decision as what UCLA is doing, then that's fine. Why should UCLA have anything to say about the college football playoff? They haven't had any impact on it so far, so why start now?
But there is a history of playing football without students on campus. Tom, when we were in school with the quarter system, there would be 3 games, maybe 4 games played before school was even in session. And students, you'd have to buy those tickets separate from your season ticket package. And when kids are home on Christmas break, there is still football going on. So there is, it's not like, well, if no classes are happening and no students are around, why would you have football? I mean, we have for decades, and I don't think they have it right now because of the semester situation going on. But way back when we were in school, it was no big deal to have football going on, and football players were like the only students on campus because that's just how it was. I still don't know how they get around allowing that to happen again, knowing that this time it's dangerous. And you can talk all you want about this is going to be as safe as possible, but there is an element of danger, and you're asking the players to take that on. And no matter how much talking that happens and how much people are brave about it or say this could happen or this could happen, I just don't see college administrators, be it athletic directors, be it a commissioner, saying we're okay putting players in danger. The backlash from that would be too great, and there will be backlash because that's, I just think social media, Twitter, I mean, that's what people are on Twitter for right now. I mean, you see national college football writers are just waiting for this opportunity to tear down administrators for putting players in danger. And we still don't know, Tom, if the players are willing to accept the quote unquote danger of playing in this era with no vaccine or no credible medical help or medicine right now to face what's out there.
Yeah, there are a couple issues with that. And one is you don't have like a college football players union to bargain with. I mean, this is something of the same issue with why isn't there a college football video game coming back? There's not like just one bargaining unit that can go and bargain collectively on behalf of all of the players with the people who are running the sport. So you like have guys making these individual decisions. That's one thing that could hold it back. The other thing is college football basically exists because of the idea that, no, of course, these aren't employees. These are just students who are here, and this is just part of enhancing their academic and their holistic collegiate experience is being a part of this intercollegiate athletic team, which, made a lot more sense in the 1950s when, the athletic budget was probably like $2 million a year and not now when it's over $100 million a year. Now, of course, that's kind of an absurd fiction, but it's an absurd fiction that the NCAA's entire existence is based on. And the NCAA can't basically say, well, these are essential workers because, well, they're not workers. These are just students who just happen to play intercollegiate athletics. And so we can't, they can't say the part out loud. They can't say the quiet part out loud, because that would kind of blow up their whole model. So that's another kind of complicating factor here. And, if they could do that, then yeah, that would probably, I would bet that the vast majority of college football players would want to be on campus and be willing to go play no matter what. And, you can chalk that up to the, that age cohort generally thinking they're invincible, or, the fact that that is an age bracket that has generally not been impacted too badly by this virus. But then you have all these other guys. You've got 60-something-year-old assistant coaches, and that's an age bracket that has been impacted by this pretty significantly. So, it's a complicated decision, and it seems like they're just going to kind of wait as long as they can and try and figure out as much as they can. And, if Ohio State comes back on campus this fall, but you're having all of your big lecture halls, all your classes that you used to have in Hitchcock 131 or Independence 100, like the huge lecture halls on campus. If all of those classes are online and you're just having, your labs or your recitations or whatever, maybe you're doing some of those in, bigger classrooms and more spaced out or whatever, is that enough to get them back to, playing football? Maybe that would probably be viewed as enough, but is the school going to be willing to do that? I don't know. And the school doesn't know yet. And that's what everyone's kind of trying to figure out right now.
Well, and then you also have to operate on what the governor says of each state.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And Oregon's governor came out, Kate Brown announced this past week, or I guess last week at this point. I don't know, Tom. Again, days are irrelevant. But the Oregon Health Authority is advising that any large gathering, at least through September, should be canceled or significantly modified. And the key there, I think, is significantly modified. Autzen Stadium seats 54,000 people, which qualifies as a large gathering.
Maybe in the Pac-12.
I was going to make a joke, but I thought I'd leave that for you. And so that takes place, so I believe, September 12th. And there's going to be some sort of a ban in place on large crowds. I don't know if that means, who knows exactly what that means for all stadiums moving forward on what capacity you can be at. I know when you look at like Walmart set up their standards, and other Target and other big box stores have set up their standards where it's like a certain number of people per 100 square or per square foot. And then you do the math and that tells you how many people you can have in your facility. I don't know if you just, are we talking a quarter? Are we talking half for a stadium? But, that this is all still being, every single day it's something new. I think it's a little early to say this through September, but again, I was just the one saying, how do you put players in danger? But it, like right now, projecting out through September, I mean, it's, I think things could happen. And I don't think there's a need to do this already, but then again, like, what does it hurt? I don't know that it hurts anything. And if you backtrack off of it, people are happy. They're not like mad. How dare you let more of us into this game, you monster? They'd actually be okay with that. But, going into one of the more raucous environments in the West is, that's a tough place to play. You take half the fans out and it becomes an easier place to play. So, that helps Ohio State a little bit. I don't know that we're really thinking about it in terms of advantage or not, but just the fact that, you've already got one game seemingly impacted from this on Ohio State's schedule.
Yeah, and that's a real bummer because this is a game that I've had scheduled or circled on the schedule for, literally years, that I've been looking forward to this trip because it's a part of the country I've never been to. It's a stadium that, when Chip Kelly really had them like going 10 years ago, that was a place that you heard it was just loud and just insane. And they have the loud foghorn and they have an enormous video screen that they're putting in an enormous new video screen this year. And it's supposed to just be a very unique atmosphere, and the campus is supposed to be pretty. Like, I've been looking forward to this trip for years. And now it's like, well, if we get to go, you're not going to have that same atmosphere. And it'll still, the campus will still be pretty, but you're not going to have the really raucous, like, I was interested to see, like, how does this stack up to the more hostile road atmospheres in the Big Ten? It's half the size of the stadium at Penn State. So how does it stack up to like the whiteout game at Penn State? Like, is it as loud? Is it, intimidating? Is it, because you hear people talk about the fact that stadium is, small, but it's really, it holds the noise in well, and it's a really crazy environment. So, the best case scenario now, it sounds like it's going to be not nearly as raucous an environment, but we'll still get to go to the game. But, as they're making these decisions this far out, there seems like right now there's always a voice in the back of your head that's like, okay, well, here's the first step towards this game not happening. Mm-hmm. And if the California universities, like I said, aren't on campus, and they may, maybe they aren't playing football, so maybe the Pac-12 is not playing football this year. Who knows? So I actually filed a Freedom of Information Act request to get the contract for the game from Ohio State, and it talks about the fact that there's what's called in law a force majeure clause, and it basically said this is the it used to be called an act of God clause, but a game shall be canceled if it becomes impossible to play the game by reason of bad weather, an unforeseen catastrophe or disaster such as fire, flood, earthquake, terrorist act, or act of political sabotage, war, or confiscation, any order of government, military, or public authority, or any prohibitory or injunctive order of any competent judicial or other governmental authority, civil or military. So basically, the game's going to be canceled if the government says it has to be canceled. And in that case, no one is responsible for any sort of loss or, there's if you default on the contract or breach the contract, you have to pay $1 million. Well, no one has to pay $1 million in that case because of that clause. But the question then becomes like, could they move the game? Could they, if they have to cancel the game, does that impact next year's game? If they have to cancel this year's game, next year's game at Ohio State would still go on as scheduled. Like that, it would have no impact on the 2021 return game in Columbus. They could negotiate to play it somewhere else. Like people talked about playing it in Las Vegas or Jerry World or something. And they certainly could do that. The contract talks about the fact that if they have to, the parties shall proceed to discuss any possible resolutions. So basically, if it's not possible to play in Oregon, then the Oregon AD and Gene Smith should get on the phone and talk about like, hey, how can we fix this? And if they can find a solution, great. If not, then they can't, and they'll play the 2021 game at Ohio State anyway.
So would this fall under political sabotage?
I was reading through that contract when we got it, and I'm like, there's so much stuff here, and no one said pandemic. Like, nobody saw this coming.
So I do wonder, like, we're going to, as some states say, we're not playing football. It will be interesting to see what happens with the scrambling to fill a schedule, if teams do, in fact, want to fill a schedule, or do you just play, does the Big Ten just play all Big Ten teams? Like, do you just, your 12 games this year are, over the course of 13 weeks, are just 12 other conference opponents, and you've got to stagger the bye weeks, right? Because you got to have an even number of teams playing every week because, that's how it has to be. And, we see that with Major League Baseball with the proposal they're talking about where it's completely regional. They're mixing American and National Leagues basically to just keep things travel as light as possible. And so maybe you've got Ohio State in their, 6-hour window of drive time or whatever, and although they, you've got teams in the Big Ten West and way over in the East that, they'll have to figure something else out for the fans. But if the fans aren't permitted, then there's not going to be a lot of traveling anyway for those people. I think this is going to be obviously a memorable year if it happens because of all of the almost running daily, weekly changes, or because it's not going to be a long time between when Oregon says we can't play to Ohio State in the Big Ten saying, well, we've got to fix this. And you might be putting schedules together in a matter of weeks. And I do wonder if at some point this is one of those models that they prepare for just in case, because now that they've got time, now is when you prepare for the contingencies. You're still working, you're still trying to go and start on time, but now would be a good time to begin all of these contingencies and maybe try to work in some backup plans.
Yeah, I mean, I think they are probably exploring every possible option right now. And every time someone throws out a what about this? It's like, well, here are the 7 problems with that. Or what about that? Like, well, that's not going to work, and here's why. And, I think at this point, I would say any football is better than no football. So whatever they have to do to get some kind of a season going would be great. It's just, there's been talk about what if they push the season back and just, start in October instead of September and give people a little more time. And, then the problem is that it sounds like this virus is maybe going to be better during the summer months and not as bad, and worse during the winter months, kind of like the flu is. And so then you're going to have the season push back more into the time when it could be more of an issue. So, there's just so many different possible solutions here, and it feels just impossible to predict what's going to happen with this, other than they're going to want to play. Everyone's going to want to play, but with so many moving parts here, if the government of New Jersey, which is, that's been a state that's been pretty hard hit, if the government of New Jersey says they can't play, and no one can play, does the Big Ten just play without Rutgers? Maybe. Would that be the best way for the Big Ten to play from now on? Yes. That's the only thing that I can say for certain. But, there are, you're talking about each of these individual states, their governments, what are they going to do? What is each individual conference going to do? And, the biggest issue right now is that the NCAA does not have a ton of overarching power in this. Like you would think, the NCAA basketball tournament, the NCAA can just cancel it because it's an NCAA event. College football is run like at the individual school and conference level. It's not, outside of the, don't pay the players kind of rules. The NCAA doesn't have a ton of say. So Mark Emmert can say whatever he wants to say, but he actually doesn't have a whole lot of input. He can't just make a decision to cancel this because the SEC or the Big Ten could just go nuts to you and do it anyway. And the NCAA doesn't really have a ton of oversight there because the NCAA isn't, when they play the Rose Bowl, that's not an NCAA event. That's the Rose Bowl. That's,
there's
the Big
no
Ten
NCAA champion in football.
Right. There is. Yeah, exactly. There is no NCAA champion in football. There is a coaches poll champion and an AP poll champion, but there is not an NCAA champion in football, which, sounds crazy since it's an NCAA sport, but that's how it is. And that's pretty much how it's always been. So yeah, there is no overarching, ruler of the sport, like one person in charge of the sport. And, the response is being handled basically state by state in a lot of cases that, the federal government can't just order everyone to play. They can suggest it. They can tell people, but if a state says, no, we don't want to do it this way, the state can do that. So there's just so many moving parts here in so many different areas that it's just every time I feel like I have a better sense for how this is going to play out, it's something changes and it's like, oh no, we still have no idea. And we're still so far out that we really have no clue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And all we can do about it is talk about it each week, Tom. Just continue to hammer it and speculate.
Be sure to tune into the next show when we have a definitive answer on how the 2020 college football season is going to play out.
I look forward to it. And I look forward to finding out from you exactly how that's going to happen. Tom, let's go ahead and wrap this one up, and we'll thank you all for listening. Remind you to keep checking out theozone.net. Continue to check out the other shows, Buckeye Sloopcast on Mondays. Continue to check this show out once a week, sometimes thrice a week, sometimes twice a week. If you subscribe, then it just shows up in your inbox, whatever player you use. It's just a magical thing. So go ahead and do that, and we thank you guys for the reviews over the last couple of weeks. We appreciate that, and we will talk to you soon.
Well, she steal a car and leave.